Welcome everybody. Welcome to Williams. So I'm Adam Falk, I'm the president of the college, and we're going to spend an hour today, I promise you not more than that, kind of thinking about the year to come. And so I'll spend a little bit of time, and then in turn my colleagues, Leticia Smith-Evans-Haynes, the vice president for institutional diversity and equity, and then Steve Klass, the vice president for campus life, Marlene Sandstrom, the dean of the college, and Rick Spalding, chaplain to the college, will all have a few words to say. Welcome. So my own daughter went off to college 2 years ago, so I'm still scarred by the experience, so I know exactly what you're going through. It's wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. We're all starting a journey together, and in particular, your sons and daughters are starting a journey. They're arriving here as probably what looked to me as late adolescents, maybe at best, and are going to leave in 4 years as adults, as real adults, and it's an extraordinary 4 years, and it's worth thinking for a little bit about what is going to be happening between now and then that's really and truly important. So we've had a big conversation, we've been having it for a number of years in this country about the value of higher education. What is the value of college? And in fact, if you pick up the paper these days, as kids are going off to college, they love to write the same article all over again, so that one's being written again. What is the value of college? Is college worth it? Well, of course college is worth it. That's a stupid question. But you wouldn't be here if college weren't worth it. But what do we mean by that? And there's often a lot of talk about outcomes, right? How do we measure outcomes? Because we don't know if something's worth it if we don't have outcomes and we haven't quantified them and measured them. And so there's a lot of talk about how you would do that, which I think is misguided in many, many ways. But people like to measure things, and so sometimes they think it's to get a high starting salary, and then you can do some economic analysis and work out the economic value of college, or did you go to grad school, things like that. Well, so Williams does really well on those metrics, and that's why when Forbes puts out a list, we come up out near the top, because they measure things like that. I'm not so sure those are great measures. I think high starting salaries, for example, value people who go into one sort of profession relative to another sort of profession. And there are many professions, like being a teacher, working for a nonprofit, that don't pay a whole lot, but that I'm super excited when our students go off and do it. So I don't think that's a great way of measuring what the value of college is. Finding a job, well, we do think that's important. That happens to our graduates, so you don't need to worry that won't happen. In fact, many of our seniors find a job with the help of a really marvelous network of Williams alumni. And so that'll happen, but I'm not sure that's a great measure either of whether college was worth it. Maybe becoming famous, is that why you go to college? Or maybe infamous? To find a spouse, I hesitate to tell you this, but many of your children will find a future spouse in their time here, if past is any prologue for that. Making the world better. I think that's a little closer to what we're here for. Really hard to measure. Super hard to measure the day that students walk across the stage. So what is the value of Williams? So here's what we do. Here's what we provide. We provide a comprehensive educational and developmental experience that produces graduates who are effective in the world. Produces graduates that are effective in the world. And that's what we aim to do. And that is an impact that plays out over a lifetime. And there is no way to understand what is going to be valuable to your daughters and sons in the next 4 years that any of you are actually going to fully appreciate until 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road. That's just the way that education works. And it's revealed, if in any one thing, I think most deeply in the capacity that Williams graduates have had for generations to adapt to a rapidly changing world. And that's the point of a liberal arts education, that we don't actually know what the world is going to look like or what it's going to need in 20 or 30 years. And it's that adaptability, that gathering together not of individual facts, but of capacities and ways of engaging the world, that's what we mean by preparing students to be effective. So how do we do that here? And we've talked about it a lot, but I want to highlight a couple of things. We do it by bringing young women and men into contact with adults over a long period of time. Faculty and staff let me say a word about faculty. I think the values of the college have been defined by the really great faculty that we have had for now a couple of hundred years, and they exemplify our fundamental values. And I'm going to pull out 3 of them because I think your children will hear a lot about them. The first is Mark Hopkins. He was the president of the college in the 19th century for 37 or so years, which is kind of a terrifying thing to imagine from where I stand. He also had to teach all the seniors ethics, which is even more terrifying. But we have a little saying around here that you probably already heard about the ideal college being Mark Hopkins on the end of a log and a student on the other. And that was really about a comment made by President, or then President, or to-be President Garfield in the 19th century about what a college really was. And in fact, he was responding to complaints that the buildings weren't very nice. And he said, well, as long as you get them sitting on a log, engaging, you've done what you need to do to create a college. And that goes to this value that we have of individual faculty and individual students engaging with each other. And if I hope for one thing for your students, your children, is that they find 1 or 2 professors that they can really engage with, or more, but that they can really engage with in that individual way. The second faculty member I'd mention from our past is Bob Gaudino. He was a professor of political science in the 60s and the early 70s, and he was interested in this idea of uncomfortable learning, that by taking students out of their comfort zones and putting them in situations that seemed alien and uncomfortable to them, there were great opportunities for learning and greater opportunities for learning. I should say that's not just about being uncomfortable. The idea isn't that if you just make people uncomfortable, they will learn. The point is that in a mentored learning environment, one in which there's real education taking place, it takes place most effectively when students are really questioning, and they're questioning not only what they see out in front of them, but they're questioning who they themselves are. And then finally, I'll mention James McGregor Burns, who is a great political scientist, who was one of the great scholars and teachers of the 20th century, actually the whole history of Williams. And Jim Burns, he wrote great books. He wrote books that a professor of political science he wrote about presidential elections at any research university would have been proud to have written, but he wrote them here at Williams, and he mentored individual students. And it's that individual mentorship by people doing really terrific scholarship in their fields of students, bringing students into that defines so much of what is the very best of the interaction students have with faculty here. And he taught here for decades, and there are decades of students who speak about learning from Jim Burns as something that they carried with them into their lives for the rest of their lives. So it's faculty and students, and again, extending that notion of the adults and students. So what are we here to do? We want to expose students to new ideas and new directions. I imagine that many of your children think they know what they want to do already. They know what they want to major in. They know what grad school they want to go to. Maybe they know where they live. They want to know where they want to retire. Maybe they know where they would like to be buried. I don't know. They have a lot of ideas. We want them to forget all of it. We want them to forget all of it. Williams is not about figuring out how to take the next step. Right? It's not a transaction, and they're going to get some things and carry them on to what's next. This is an experience that your children can't fathom yet, and so they should be open as much as they possibly can to everything that's around them. We also want to expose them to new people, and this is the most interesting, diverse group of people that they are likely ever to have been in their entire lives. And one of the great evolutions of Williams, I think the single most important change that Williams has undergone in the last decades, is the evolution of the diversity of our student body in gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual expression, class, citizenship, all of it. Everyone who is here belongs here. Everyone who is admitted here belongs here. Everyone who comes here can and should thrive here at Williams. And every single person in our community, students, faculty, staff, everyone benefits from the extraordinary diversity of the student body. Let me close with 2 other thoughts. The first is that you're not customers, and our students are not customers. you're not purchasing a college education. It's not actually that kind of relationship between students and the institution. It's much deeper than that. It is not a commercial relationship, but a moral relationship. And students come to Williams by whatever dimension success could possibly be measured here. It requires the deepest possible investment by students in themselves and in their peers and in the institution. And we ask of them that they do that. We demand of them that they do that, right? And so they're responsible for each other's education through the platform that we have here at the college. And that is a moral commitment. We have a moral commitment to students to do everything we can to help them get the very most they can from Williams, but they bring their own moral commitments here to do the very same thing. And that's actually why it's wonderful to work at a college and why it's wonderful to work with young people. You're starting a journey too. Congratulations. So I'm going to ask something of you, which is to give your kids the space and the time to become who it is that they will be. Help them to embrace the full variety of what Williams has to offer. Every single student is going to have moments of success and moments of difficulty. And so celebrate the one with them, support them through the other. We are your partners in helping your children succeed in the broadest sense of what we mean by that. And they're now forever, as are you, forever part of the Williams family. So thank you so much for sharing them with us. And here's to a wonderful year and a great start to your relationship to Williams College. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Leticia Smith-Evans-Haynes, the Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity.
Hello. Welcome, parents, families, guardians, and friends of the wonderful students who are joining us. It is an honor to stand here before you today. And I am, again, Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity. But just over 20 years ago in 1995, my parents drove me to Williamstown in 2 cars and sat where you're sitting today. So I'm an extremely proud graduate of the class of 1999 of this institution. To be clear, Williams was great then, but it truly is phenomenal now. So when offered the opportunity and President Falk said that he would hire me, there was no question that I wanted to return. I yearn to give back to the institution because Williams College is truly a place where everyone, regardless of who they are or any perceived difference, can live, learn, and thrive. So as Vice President, I work strategically with all community stakeholders and constituents, including students, faculty, staff, and alumni, to ensure a diverse, equitable, and inclusive campus. I help guide efforts to conceptualize, define, assess, and nurture, and cultivate diversity as an institutional and educational resource and priority. Every person in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Equity works to ensure that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation or identity, national origin, economic or ability status, have meaningful access to all of the college's resources. Here are 2 examples. The Davis Center, which is formerly our multicultural center, in partnership with students, faculty, staff, alumni, and off-campus stakeholders, strives to facilitate collaboration, dialogue, and explorations for social change to create an inclusive environment for learning, living, and community. In addition, the Office of Special Academic Programs and Support aims to ensure all students thrive academically at Williams and beyond through opportunities and programs such as research fellowships that work to eradicate racial and economic disparities in higher education. So have no doubt that if your son or daughter needs anything, our doors are wide open. In the most wonderful Williams way, all of the offices here, including the Dean of the College's office and the Vice President for Campus Life's office, and many others work closely together and diligently to ensure that our students have an optimal experience here, so that throughout their tenure they can engage in critical discourse, thoughtful discourse, and respectful discourse. And there's no question that some of that discourse will surround issues of diversity and equity. When I say Williams is phenomenal today, it is because we remain intentional about what we do. So as we develop programs and coordinate curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities to be more diverse and inclusive, We have his story and her story as powerful guides. You may know that during the first 175 or so years of its existence, there were no women on the Williams College campus. When women arrived on campus in the 1970s, there were very few of them. Similarly, there were very few students of color. But today, 40 years later, or more, Williams embraces strategic efforts to ensure that its classrooms are diverse with students and faculty of different races, ethnicities, and genders, to name a few. This is evidenced by the fact that Williams has approximately 8% international students, nearly 40% US students of color, approximately 50% men and women as students, and 16% first-generation students, and 50% of students receiving financial aid. So there's no question that Williams' commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is staunch. As I close, I'd add that I do not assume that we all share the same understanding and definition of diversity. Indeed, we would not be a diverse group of people if we did. So when I say diversity, know that Williams strives for identity diversity, what one may actually look like, and cognitive diversity, how one may think. Here, we believe that diversity and exceptional go hand in hand. A great school requires exceptional people, perspectives, and problem solving. A great school benefits from including people with diverse perspectives, differences in identity, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, physical ability, sex identity and orientation, economic status, to name a few. They all correlate with cognitive diversity. This week, as the first-year class joins this community, it comes to life. So the people behind the papers, the essays, and the applications are here. Their presence will be seen and felt across campus. We know that each member of the class is unique and brings with them diversity in thought and being, and for that, we are extremely grateful. Once again, welcome to Williams College. I hope you enjoy your stay, your short stay. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Steve Klass. Thank you.
Welcome, families, and let me add my congratulations as well. I know from my own experiences with 3 sons over the last several years that today is a pretty surreal day for a lot of us, and about 1 million different mixed emotions. I know especially for those of you who are doing this for the first or only time, I found a regular deep cleansing breaths throughout the day were really helpful. I'd like to spend the next few minutes going over some of the goals and principles that guide the work that we do here in student affairs at Williams. Altogether, Leticia, Marlene, Rick, and myself alone represent over 250 of our professional colleagues who work together daily as a part of a broad and very tightly woven network of student support here at Williams. You've met a lot of them today, and your students will certainly meet a lot more in the coming weeks. Collectively, our aim is that all of our students will thrive academically, socially, and emotionally, and that they'll participate as constructive and engaged members of a vibrant and welcoming community that is Williams. And to help them thrive, we focus on ensuring that no matter what is going on in their lives, they recognize that there are no wrong doors for them to walk through when they're dealing with a crisis, with a basic question, looking for support, just answers to something that's going on in their lives. And that just as importantly, they have access to critical services, whether they're on or off campus, 24/7. Marlene's going to talk about some of these services in greater detail in a few minutes, but I remember my own rhetorical absorption rate. I'll say it again, 24/7 access to critical services, and no wrong doors to get into those services. Just very quickly, as Vice President for Campus Life, because a lot of places do this work differently, I'm responsible for the following areas. For the Chaplain's Office, for our Center for Learning and Action, housing and dining services, our health services and counseling, our campus safety and security, student activities, leadership development, et cetera. But we mention these things in this way, not because we think about how we divide up our work in supporting students, but because of the tight network that I mentioned before that we create, in which together we can most effectively invest these considerable resources in the service of student success. Because we are first and foremost a community, and it's the shared sense of community that informs all of the work that we do together. And to that end, I firmly believe that one of our greatest attributes is our scale. We're large enough to have this significant resource base, and as great as our buildings and grounds and programs are, I'm really talking about our human resources here, the amazing people that do this work together in support of your students. But at the same time, our small scale as a campus community allows us to develop the kinds of meaningful individual relationships that make the Williams experience so uniquely personal. And as we all know from our own experience, we're much more effective in taking care of ourselves and others when we really know those members of our community well, and when we don't put up any kind of barriers to access to building those relationships. Making the most of one's entire college experience really requires a recognition of the critically important connection between students' co-curricular activities, the stuff they do outside the classroom, and the development of their emotional intelligence. So with that in mind, at Williams, we provide myriad opportunities to encourage students to pursue their artistic passions, to feed their spiritual selves, to identify and fine-tune their leadership skills, to serve in the broader Berkshire community and many students globally as well, to take care of themselves and each other emotionally and physically. And while the kinds of learning that these experiences generate aren't directly duplicated in the classroom, they're frequently complementary in ways that enhance holistic student development. And just to underscore this point briefly, I want to share a couple of excerpts from the goals of our residential life program, because embedded in this language are three key principles that drive a significant amount of the work that we do in campus life overall. First, that the program should enhance the intellectual growth and emotional development that occur both inside and outside the classroom. Second, that the program should be intentional about developing a sense of community and supporting the cultivation of emotional intelligence in students that comes from that. And lastly, that the program provides the intellectual and emotional space for students to develop their own identities safely and fearlessly, to adapt to campus culture and to thrive away from home, to embrace the diversity of backgrounds and ideas to which they're being introduced, and to feed their intellectual curiosity by helping them become active listeners and socially mature problem solvers. Our work is predicated on the belief that these next 4 years are going to be among the most transformative of your students' lives. And today, already, they're beginning this first important step on their journey in their first entry meetings, immersing themselves in new communities, sharing expectations, being introduced to campus culture, meeting new and very different people from around the world. And it almost goes without saying that this relentless process of learning and analyzing and reassessing their own values and beliefs will bring some challenges along the way, and maybe will raise issues that neither you nor your student have had to face before. And as we all know so well, but a lot of young people are still in the process of learning, it's when we address these major challenges head on that we face our greatest growth and we achieve our greatest healing along the way. So we can say with confidence, everyone is going to require some form of assistance with some aspect of their experience in college. And I can say with equal confidence that help to address this is available on campus through one of our resources, and if it's not something we provide on campus, we'll get access to it off campus. So we really want all of our students to get to know all of these different services, and we'd love to enlist your help in getting them involved as soon as possible. The earlier, the better. So today, your students are taking their first steps on this ramp of independence, and I'm guessing that the most challenging part of this for you is going to be to allow them, as Adam said, to manage their own way through this critical period of their lives. I know it sure was for my wife and myself. As I mentioned, the deep cleansing breaths go on for more than just today. And as your students find their own voices and experiment with new identities, gain their footing as members of this new and ever-changing community, they'll need space and they'll need grace. It's our aspiration that all of our students at Williams will thrive as resilient, productive, engaged, and empathetic members of our community. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. And now it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Marlene Sandstrom, the new dean of the college.
Hello, parents and families. I would like to add my welcome and my congratulations to all of you, and to say thank you, really thank you, for sending us your wonderful sons and daughters. We are really thrilled to have them here, and we're looking forward to the chance to get to know them better. Right now, while we're all in here, your young people are settling into their entries, they're meeting their JAs and the other new students, and they're beginning the process of getting to know each other. And as part of that process, they have the opportunity to get to know people who are different in all sorts of ways from those that they have grown up with. And that is really a core part of the magic of this place. And we're excited about the ways in which this incredible group of young people are going to grow and learn from each other. We know that when the students come here, they come with a real richness of character that comes from their deep connections to their families and their home communities. And Williams is a better place because of the ways that your family's experiences and perspectives and traditions and values will contribute to the community that our students build here. So thank you for that. Thank you for enriching our community. We know that this is an incredibly exciting time for families. It can also be a challenging one. So I'm going to say just a few things about some of the key supports and resources that parents are often most concerned about. If you have any questions, though, about any of this, please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us. There's all kinds of helpful information on our website. There's also one very easy port of entry for information, and that is an email address, families@williams.edu. If you contact us through that email, it will automatically be funneled to exactly the right person who's in the best position to address your question. And Rob White, who I see standing in the very back, who can wave, he is the man behind the curtain of that portal, and he is very, very skilled at making sure that everybody's questions get answered. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. So first, I want to say a word about healthcare. The college has a health center that includes nurses, nurse practitioners, health educators, physicians, as well as psychological counseling professionals. Visits to the health center for all of those services are free and they are unlimited. Williams is unusual in this way. We're able to provide students with all of the care that they need without having to worry about session limits. The health center is very accessible. It has hours on the weekends as well as on the weekdays, and students can arrive as drop-ins or they can make appointments. There's also a number for off-hours crises, and of course we can transport students to local hospitals or coordinate care with local specialists if ever the need arises. If you have particular concerns about how your student will manage a current or an ongoing health issue, don't hesitate to reach out to the health center. They'll be happy to discuss that with you. The second issue I wanted to touch on was safety. Our campus safety and security department is open 24 hours a day, every day of the week, every day of the year. And our officers maintain the safety of the campus, and they also make it their business to get to know the students very well, often by name. Not necessarily because those students are in frequent trouble, although that's sometimes the case, but usually it's because it's a priority for them to find ways to make themselves friendly and approachable to the students. Many of our officers have children of their own who have gone through college. Some of them have children who have come here to Williams for college. They're very familiar with what it's like to be a student here, and they are an incredible resource. In fact, our students often talk about how campus safety and security has helped them, from the small problems like being locked out of their room, which, believe it or not, has already started. We've had campus safety is probably busy right now helping students who have locked their keys in their room, and also for bigger problems like needing transport or support in a stressful moment. They work very closely with the local police when they need to, and they care tremendously about the students that they work with every day. And even though your students have not been here very long, they probably have already committed to memory one very important fact, which is campus safety is always the right first call for trouble. The dispatchers can find health services, psychological services, the deans, and anybody else that they need day or night, any time of the year. So that is always the right number to call. That's true for our students. That's also true for you. So if your young person calls you and you have the sense that they are in immediate difficulty, that is the right number for you to start with as well. 597-4444. That's campus safety. I also want to mention another support that may seem counterintuitive, and that is academic resources. I know that your students are here because they have been incredibly successful in academics over the year. Still, academic resources are something that nearly every Williams student uses to strengthen and hone their skills. Our students do this across all 4 years and for all different kinds of reasons. The supports range from study skills training workshops, the writing workshop, the Math Science Resource Center, peer tutoring, guidance about accessibility accommodations, and advice about fellowships and study abroad opportunities. Seeking out academic resources is what strong students do to become even stronger here at Williams. So I encourage you to encourage your students to make the most of those resources early and often. Also, please encourage your kids to make connections to one of the most valuable resources we have on campus, and that is our professors. If you hear from your sons or daughters that they are struggling with a course, they're losing confidence in their ability, or they're feeling overwhelmed by their workload, you should remind them, first of all, that this is very normal. There's probably not a person in this room or even on the stage who has not had a crisis of confidence at some point. It will happen. And that is a great moment to reach out to their professors. As a faculty member myself, I'm a member of the psychology department, I can say this with confidence. Our faculty members chose Williams because they wanted to be part of an institution that puts its undergraduates right at the center of its universe. On top of their passion for their discipline and their scholarship, they are truly passionate about their students. And when students have the instinct to avoid their professors when they feel worried or overwhelmed, we really want them to do just the very opposite. Come and talk to their faculty members. There's a lot more in the way of support and resources, but I want to wrap up with a key principle that runs through all of them, and that has to do with supporting students as they learn how to assume an increasingly higher level of personal responsibility for themselves. Responsibility for setting goals, for making choices, and taking the initiative for seeking out the resources that they want and need. A major aim of the next 4 years is to help our students become more independent across all those dimensions, and all of our offices work really hard to support that development. The Health Center is a great example. As adults, we know that negotiating the healthcare system can be daunting, and some of you may be concerned about how your sons and daughters are going to manage that system on their own. Our Health Center is designed to be user-friendly, and it actually helps students figure out how to manage their own health care. It offers a drop-in service where students can go and just get help figuring out how sick they are and whether they need just a little bit of advice or something more. Students who are unsure of whether they're even sick enough to be seen can go in, and our staff will help them to figure it out. Part of their mission is to help students become experts in their own health by giving them the tools to manage their long-term wellness. Talking with professors is another way in which we encourage students to take initiative. Often students come to the dean's office when they're struggling. They can't meet a deadline, they failed an exam or feel like they're about to, and they come to the deans for help. We're very glad that they've done that, and the first thing we do is help them figure out a way to reach out to the professors themselves. They can call or email from our offices. We can role play with them to help them figure out a way to start that conversation that feels comfortable. The most important thing is helping students figure out a way to make that connection and take that initiative themselves. Another piece of the independence and sense of agency that we're working toward has to do with your young people's right to privacy and confidentiality. As college students, they now have legal ownership over their academic and personal records. And I know that that can be a big transition for many parents who are used to having access to all of that information. We can't actually legally call you when your students come to the health center for care, or to the dean's office for help, or to campus safety about a bit of trouble that needs to be straightened out. Giving students ownership of their own experience is a very important part of the transition to college life. Having said that, we will certainly reach out to parents when students are in danger. There's no doubt about that. If there's a major health or any other major crisis, we will absolutely call you. Or if your son and daughter is up to it, we'll help them contact you themselves. But most of the time, our students are making their own decisions about what information to share and when they want to reach out for advice. And grappling with those choices is really important. It's part of the process of learning to manage stressors and make reasoned decisions and step up as responsible young adults. And these are all good things that are going to prepare them to make their way in the world. And I know that's a goal that all of us share. So again, thank you very much for bringing all these phenomenal young people to Williams. We are very excited to spend time with them and to be part of this new chapter in their lives. And I'd like to introduce the chaplain to the college, Rick Spalding.
I get together with my colleagues in the chaplain's office every so often to sit down and study each other's sacred texts together. There are four of us, I should say. Father Gary Castor, a Catholic priest, Hazan Bob Sher, a Jewish cantor, Sharif Rosen, our Muslim chaplain, and me, I'm a Protestant Christian. Whenever I tell people about anything we do together, it sounds like the setup for a joke. When we study together, the payoff doesn't usually come in the form of a punchline, though there's almost always some laughter, very occasionally some tears. A few weeks ago, we happened to be reading a text together that I thought at first was familiar ground for me. Cantor Bob was leading, and the focus was a passage that I've read many times before. But you know how sometimes you can look at something that's so familiar, something that you've looked at countless times, and something makes you see it as though you've never seen it before? So here was this verse in front of us that said in just 7 words that one way people might think about the meaning of struggle in their lives is to see it as a way to learn what was in your hearts. Not that most of us find struggle or hardship to be anything we'd go looking for, but that when it finds us, the thing about it is that it opens up a window into a part of us where the truest and most important things reside, to learn what was in your hearts. At the point at which we sat down to study together, summer here was casting a long shadow. There's a thing that happens here in this little valley when you think summer is still in full swing, but something happens to the light in the late afternoon. Something happens in the air, and the lush green starts to feel ready to change. I think the four of us in that moment heard you coming over the horizon, you and your sons and daughters. Felt the nearness of the beginning of another fresh season of learning, which is to say, sometimes another season of struggle and growing and change. The most alive time of year here. And I think this day of all days of the year is the most alive day. Anyway, the vivid threshold of this season got us thinking about how, for those young people who are just over there unpacking for it right now, this is the beginning of a process of learning what was in their hearts. Maybe what was there all along, or what has been growing there, maybe what you planted there or helped to water with laughter or tears. Reading the sacred text of their inner lives where the truest and most important things are. Reading things that are so familiar, but you know how it is sometimes. Something happens and you read it in a way that you've never read it before. It's interesting to think that we might not already know what's in our own hearts. That it might take an experience of struggle to show us what's been there. Maybe that's why we've made this part of education into a journey, because there's something new in the air, in the light, in the landscape. And then there you are, reading something that you thought was so familiar, as though you've never read it before. I don't really mean to cast the great adventure that's just beginning now for these new students as a struggle in some foreboding, shadowed way. But you know, because you've been watching them learn and grow already, that a certain amount of stress can build up sometimes around the edges of that process, as we've each said in our own ways. We know that too, and that's a big part of why we chaplains are here. I hope you'll get to meet my chaplain buddies at some point along the way. We spend at least half of our time just listening to students talk about what's happening to them. Some of them talk about that process as though it's a spiritual journey. Most don't. Yes, we spend time saying Mass and cooking Shabbat dinners and leading prayers and planning for celebrations of Eid al-Adha and Yom Kippur and Diwali and All Saints' Day, all of that. But mostly I think they come to see us, I hope they come to see us, as companions in the studying of the sacred text of their days, their dreams, their struggles and their triumphs, learning what's already in their hearts. And in this essential piece of our work, we are none of us alone. As you'll discover, and as we've each said, over these next 4 years, there are dozens and dozens of adults whose whole reason for being here and for feeling that it's such a privilege to work here, oh, you will never know, such a privilege, is because it's our high calling to study the sacred text of these hearts and minds with your sons and daughters. I like to say that of all the great things about Williams, one of the greatest is one of the simplest, which is that it's a virtual certainty that over the course of these years, every student will find at least one adult with whom they can be wholeheartedly and unabashedly, honestly, courageously themselves. At least one adult, and usually a handful, who gets them, with whom they can study the sacred text of what's going on in the place where the truest and most important things in them are written. And that's, of course, part of why they're here, too. They're here for each other. Most students suffer a broken heart at least once while they're here. And it seems to be in the nature of this place that virtually every student helps to mend someone else's broken heart many times while they're here. Of course, it's not just texts or hearts that get studied here, not just books that get read. It's also people and circumstances and questions that don't fit neatly into a syllabus or a lab report. We're all trying every way we can to help them find their way to questions that will help them make meaning out of their education. Because an education doesn't just automatically come with meaning. And questions that will help them find a sense of vocation that's maybe a layer or two deeper than just finding a job. Because a job doesn't necessarily come with a sense of vocation. and questions that will help them to spill their own high hopes out into the landscape as flagrantly and joyfully as they can. In the chaplain's office, we work especially closely with the Center for Learning in Action and the Davis Center, because some of the text that needs to be studied is out there, out in the struggling world. I think we can all feel right now the leading edge of the question, what is going to become of this world? And sometimes the best texts to study are the stories of other people's struggles and triumphs, their dreams and their longings. And I hope your son or daughter will end up spending some time poring over the texts of other hearts than their own. Because more than anything else, the world now needs people who respect what is written there and know that our best hope of understanding the mystery of ourselves is to labor to understand the magnificence of others. So, here we are, just on the edge of something. Do you feel that leading edge in the air, in the colors, in the light? Something is ready to change. I imagine that you're studying your beloved child today, reading that face that is so familiar, hearing that voice, and seeing things that as often as you've looked and listened over these 17 or 18 years, you've never noticed before, or never seen in quite this way. There's a season of new learning just ahead for you, too. Stretching to understand who this person is on the cusp of childhood and adulthood. Struggling to find ways to show how much you care without letting your caring get in the way. Wondering what it's going to mean for you to be a parent now in this new chapter. Maybe you'll look back on today and see it as a day when you learned what was in your heart all along. I hope so. It's a good text to study. I would call it a sacred text. We wish you blessing. We long to stay in touch with you, and we hold close this cherished responsibility and privilege of knowing your wonderful children. Thank you.